Okay, let's take a look today at Oasis Security Management Solution. In particular, today we want to take a look at how Oasis handles detection, remediation, and event management in this space. When we look at the Oasis product, one of the things that makes it unique is that it focuses as much on a proactive approach to security management as it does a reactive approach to this. And today what we'll do is we're going to go through looking at how it's able to manage conversations and what applications are available in the environment so that you would understand what is going on and also where there's potential risk. And then we're going to go through a detection proof of value to be able to show how we can detect potential threats coming in off the wire and be able to remediate them using Oasis Virtual Operator. So to start with, let's go ahead and go to our security page. So we can go to our security detection and remediation page. On this page, what you actually see is an event viewer that allows you to be able to see any of the threats that's been coming in, as well as any other events that are taking place in the monitoring. So if you look down around the fourth or fifth line down, you'll see where we have detection events that came in from the IDS that's done notifications to us right here. And you can also see the different changes that's been going on in the actual environment. The event manager that sits behind this display does the root cause correlation, it does event aggregation and deduplication of events, and makes it in a way that we can be able to then determine what events are creating impact or potentially where impact is actually coming from. And also you'll notice based on the different color events, we're basically assigning different priority to each one of them. We'll come back to this page in just a moment when we start the proof of value, but let's go ahead and start with the listening ports, and then we'll go to conversation data. When we take a look at an environment, we know that one of the simplest things we can do out here from a prevention method is to be able to understand what we have in the environment that could potentially be creating risk. So if you don't mind, we're going to go ahead and click on the service and just do a sort there. And what you'll see is for all the servers in this environment, this is showing all their server names on the left-hand column. And if you'll look over here to the second column, that's giving us our TCP ports in which things are actually listed on. We can tell what protocol it is by the fourth column. So I said TCP port, it could be UDP as well. Then you have the service name that's in the third column. On the fourth column, you'll see what IP it's actually listening at on the server. Anywhere you see anything in blue, like where the server names are, that's a pivot point. And so anytime you see that, whether we're looking at event data or in this case where we're looking at listing data, you can click on it and go directly to this device. So to start with, let's take a look at how this page could work. So for example, let's say that we were interested in potentially what might be listening on, say, for FTP. We could either do a search on FTP or we could do a search on port. So we can do global searches at the top, but for this one, let's just do a search in the column. So if we go underneath the services, and what we're going to do is we're going to do a search on FTP. So we're going to just select contains and see anywhere that FTP contains. We could have also went to the second one and searched on port 21 just as easy. So what we actually see out here is we see two servers that actually have FTP listing on their port. So if we wanted to be able to see what was actually communicating with these devices, we could go over to our conversation, look at it globally, or in this case, let's just grab the top one and let's pivot on it and let's open up a dashboard for it and let's take a look and see what's going on with this device. Okay, you're now looking at the dashboard for H054. It's a server that we have out here, and you can tell on the left-hand side it's a Linux server by looking underneath the description. What we want to do is we want to go take a look at the conversation data. So we're going to click on it first, and then we'll look at the diagrams just following this. So when we go underneath the conversation data here, on the far right side, you'll see all the listening ports that has actually taken place for this device. And so you can tell everything that it has out there that's available someone connect to. And then on the left-hand side, you'll be able to see any of the conversations that has taken place. Now, this data is updated every 5 minutes because we're actually pulling this with SNMP. And if you'll look at the top, we can change it from 24 hours to any range if you want to go back in time. So what we were looking at is to see is, are there any device that has been talking to this on with FTP? And when we look over here, we see that when this device is actually either a client or in the server mode, it hasn't been talking to anyone on it. If we go to the top and change it to 7 days, let's see if anyone has in the past 7 days. So now when you take a look over here, if we go, we will see at the very top that there was a device that come in from that 198.57 address that did make a connection on FTP to this actual server. And so we can see that it has 13 counts in the past 7 days in which it's actually made a connection to it. And on the far right, you can see then, I believe it's the same. I see a record count of 19. I believe that was what I saw before, listing ports that are out there. So if we wanted to see if anything had went down or came up during this time range, this is the way you could tell is by looking at longer time ranges. So if you would like to see this more in a diagram type pictorial, let's click on diagrams. So the diagrams will give us a capability to be able to look at stuff either from a network connectivity standpoint, as we see right here where we, on the far right, where you actually see a server that is connected to a switch, and if we hover over the line, it will give us the details about it. And if you look in the left-hand side, you'll see any type of relationships this has to it. And in this case right here, it's a member of 2 groups that I'm aware of. If you look at the circle with the little dots that are color-coded, it gives you an indication of what the events are that are out there associated either with the groups or the device. And if we click on them, it will bring those events up. The color code represents whatever the highest level severity that's active within the environment at this point in time. And you can see, looking at this, that we have some IDS alerts that are at a critical level that have been detected on here. So if we do a close here, let's go take a look at our conversation at a diagram level. So underneath network connectivity on the left, we're going to click on the configuration item on that widget. And so we're going to change it from network connectivity to conversation data. So by clicking here under the menu, we do edit config, and it could have been set up this way to start with. And we're going to change it so that we're doing conversation data. We're going to change it so that we get both IPs and FQDN. And we're also going to get both TCP and UDP traffic, which is selected there. Then all we have to do is select done. And now what we're looking at instead of physical connectivity is we're looking at layer 4 conversation data. So what you'll see here is where everything that's talking to this server, it's kind of hard in this picture to be able to see it, but we can make it a larger screen. If a server is both a client and a server to another system, the arrow indicates which way the client is coming from. So right now these are all pointing to the same device, except for the one arrow pointing to H55. There are some cases where you'll see 2 arrows whenever it's both a client and a server going to the same system. Now let's go back to our security dashboard, and let's look at our global conversation data. So we already looked at listing ports. Now we're going to look at the conversation data. So for this entire environment, we see that in the past 24 hours, and I'm doing that by looking at the top right, we see that that's what our time range is set to. It can be a custom time range or it defaults to 24 hours. We can see that there was over 16,000 connections that were established during this time, during this environment. Again, anywhere you see that there's blue, that means that's a pivot point in which you can actually click on, and it will launch the dashboard to go into specifically in it. For all of these devices we have here too, we do a DNS lookup if we do not have their names in here. So looking at the conversation data here is, remember, is we can do a global search, and let me show you how to do that. So we're going to search on ESM US H135. And what it's going to do is look in every column, and it's going to come back with where this device actually exists. And so what you'll see here is that in the left-hand column on the second line, you'll see where it's actually a server, and it's being connected to from H136. And then if you go down lower, you'll see where it's a client, in numerous cases, connected to other servers as well. So you can see that it's had bidirectional conversations with different devices that are out here. You'll also be able to see what protocols that it's actually been communicating on and the number of sessions that it's actually established with those devices. So we'll go ahead and do a clear here. Just delete that, and we'll do a search again. So one of the things that may come into handy is, like we showed earlier, where you can come in here and search on any protocol or any protocol name or IP to be able to determine if you have an application that's running on that port. So in addition to being able to go out and doing like your scans of your network to determine what ports are open, this is a way to be able to simply get it from every device in your environment and understand what is open on every server. This way it eliminates the need to get around firewalls to do detection or from different points into it. And if you wanted to, just for validation, once you do a scan, using this data to validate against it is very handy. It's also very handy if you're looking at doing data center moves. I like it if someone, like for example, when we have new threats that are identified, it's a really quick way for us to come in here and identify what parts of the environment have potential risk to look at. So we want to move on from our conversation data now back to our event data. What we're actually going to do at this point in time is we're actually going to go through a proof of value. And what we want to show is where we've been displaying the active monitoring that's going on and how we're using discovery data to be able to look at what's in the environment. Let's go ahead and now take a look at doing detection and remediation. So for our first proof of value, what we want to do is we want to simulate some traffic out on the wire. That traffic is going to be picked up by the IDS. The IDS is going to create an event that we'll actually see appear here within our event management system. We'll go ahead and right now let's open up our automation. Underneath our automation, we have a virtual operator, and I call it a virtual operator instead of just automation for the reason is if you have repeatable procedures, it has the ability to be able to simulate anything a person can do. So it really does represent a virtual person for this. We have two workflows here, and I'm going to just kind of walk you through them really quickly. We have a delay. If you'll take a look here on the first one, actually let's go ahead and hit the filter just above this, and I'll look and show you how we have this set up. This filter right here is just showing that we have a workflow rule that's going to go through and it's going to match on events. First of all, it's going to go down and where you see active equals 1. That right there is just showing that this is actually coming in that's in an active state. If it was 0, it would be in a cleared state. We're going to be able to see, we're going to also say that it must be coming in from this source. We can have many sources in which Oasis takes inputs from. This is coming in from our IDS. And then for this one, we know what we're going to be simulating, so we're going to say for the server that equals this. So we'll go ahead and cancel out of this right here. And so when you look at this first one, is what we've done is this isn't the way we would do it in production, but we're going to have a wait on it of 3,000 seconds, which will give us time to walk through it. And then when you go to the second field, let's go ahead and click on it. Let's just open this one up. What this one says is that we have a name on this one called Set Firewall Rules. It is linked from the entry, which you see right before it when you look to the left. And what we say is to give this 120 seconds for this to process. And we're doing a action of WinRM. And so basically what we're going to do is based upon this rule coming in, it's going to perform the actions that we have here. If you click on the down arrow there under actions, you'll see that you can just build a bunch of generic actions and then you can apply it to your workflow wherever you have it for your virtual operator to perform. And what it's going to do is it's going to perform the actions that you see here at the bottom. It's being applied to the firewall rules for outbound, and there's another one that's a little bit lower that's being applied to the firewall rules for inbound. So if we take a look here at the actual rule that's going to be executed, you see right there where it says WinRM firewall outbound. We'll go over here and take a look at our actions next. So let's just do a cancel here. And let's go over to our actions tab. And then underneath our action tabs, we're going to search on a WinRM. So if you look at the very bottom, there's two. There's an inbound and an outbound rule. These right here, once you create any of these actions, you can then apply it in any of your workflow. So let's just open it up. And so what we're going to have is, if you look at the top of it, you got a name of it. You got a timeout value for how long you're giving it to process. its top is WinRM, and you can look underneath. If you click the down arrow, you'll see that we have many different types for being able to select, like email or Groovy scripts or SNMP. So basically any type of connection. Once you select that connection type, it gives you whatever information you need to populate that's appropriate for that type of connection. So in this right here, we're saying we're going to go to this server H135 and its IP, and we're going to execute the command that's right here. So if we click on this, we can scroll over, and what you'll see is we're doing a WinRM connect, and we're executing this command that's actually going to block traffic coming from 40.1.190.106. So what we're going to do is we're going to generate traffic. That traffic is going to be an attack against the server H135. Oasis is going to pick that up. It's going to create an event. It's going to go down the escalation path, and then we're going to execute this WinRM command to update the policy on that server. So we'll go ahead and click a cancel here. So before we get started, let's bring up the server that we're going to update the policy for so that you can actually see what it looks like. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take a look at the inbound and outbound rules for the server in which we're going to initiate a threat attack against. And so right now, when we're looking at the inbound rules, you don't see anything in there that says Oasis. And if you click on, when we click on our outbound rules, you'll see at the top of it there is nothing here for outbound rules. Okay? So we're now going to go back to the Oasis monitor, and before we do that, we're going to go ahead and ping the address to show that it is reachable. So we're going to do a ping space, and then the server that we're going after. All right, and we can see that it's actually reachable. We see it responding, so let's go ahead and do a Control-C. All righty, and then we're going to go to our dashboard for security and detection and remediation. All right, we're looking at the security detection remediation event page. And if you'll notice that we have the dashboard set to live, which what that means is that as any events come in, you will see them automatically, any updates or any changes, you'll see them happen in real time. All the columns are sortable, and of course we can filter here as well. So what we're going to be looking for is an IDS event that will be taking place, and we're going to see that because we're going to generate some traffic that's going to appear to be an attack on a server. Once that the IDS picks it up, an event will be generated. We'll see the virtual operator pick it up, and it will start down the workflow. We put a wait at the beginning of the workflow to give us plenty of time to go through this proof of value. So we're going to go ahead and start the simulation of the traffic. And if you look at the top line, in a few moments we should see an event appear. And we just seen it here, and so you see it's a high severity. We're going to jump back over to our automation just to show you that it picked up, but we've got a 3,000-second delay there before it does anything, so we'll be okay. So we're going over to live, and what you should see under the security detection is, see that where it says event 1? That is the event that is picked up. We'll come back to this and show how this works in just 1 second, but let's go back to our dashboard and spend just a moment on this event. So we're going to go ahead and open this event up so that we can look at the details of it. Okay, so as you see the event, one of the things that we talked about before is anywhere you see anything in blue, you can be able to see it's an active link or a pivot point. If you click on H136 right now, we can actually bring this up, and we'll be able to go over and we'll take a look at the diagram and see who it's actually communicating with. So we're looking at the dashboard for H136. We're going to click on the diagrams page. In the diagrams page, if you look on the right, you'll see the application conversations. And so what we see right here is where we picked up the conversation that came from H136 to H135. And so this is where we know that we actually have the threat taking place as we speak. So we're going to go back now to our automation, and let's take a look and see what actually happens here. So in our automation, we're going to look in under our live. We're going to go under security detection and mediation, and we're going to open the first step up. And here you will see the event. Now, what we did is we put a 3,000-second timer, which would normally not be here, as we mentioned earlier, but we will push it along just a second, but we wanted time to be able to see it. You'll see all of the events that are in this workflow at the time and the details like we already looked at. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to just push this forward. So we'll go back over, and you can see what that area is. What that'll do is it'll say skip waiting on this countdown and go ahead and move to the next step. So we're going to click and say OK. and then exit out of this box by clicking OK. And you'll see where it moved over to the next step. The next step is now where it's actually going out and performing the action. If we open this up, right here we'll see the event is actually here. But right now this is where it's going to run those two top actions at the top. You see for the inbound and the outbound. So what we're going to go do now is we're going to bring up our PuTTY and see if we can still ping. At this point, it should have put an access list in place to keep ping from actually working. So we expect it to fail. And we see the request, and we don't see any response. Okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to open up the server itself, and what we'll look at now is we'll click on inbound rules. And you see at the top where it says Oasis Firewall Inbound Rule is doing a block on 40.1.190.160. So it is blocking it for all protocols. So we put in a pretty severe one. If we click on outbound rules, we'll see the same rule has now been applied to this. Now, we're doing this as applying these to the policy on a Windows server, but this could have been on a Linux box, it could have been on a firewall, it could have been in any virtual environment. So the important thing to realize is we're monitoring this traffic. It does not matter if we're talking about virtual machines within, or whether we're talking about physical machines as well. Once we do the detection and the monitoring for this, is we can be updating policies on any type of device that are out there that would be blocking traffic.